Welcome to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't, a podcast dedicated to helping you create the relationship you truly want.
How do you silence your own inner critic and your child's? Episode 153. Today we are going to deal with that voice that's in all of our heads, the one that judges, doubts, second guesses, and compares. It tells us we're not doing enough, we're not good enough, or we're not parenting in the right way. That voice, often called the inner critic, is oh so relentless. Most of us don't remember the first time we heard that critical voice in our heads, but we do remember how it made us feel. Unfortunately, that internal chatter isn't just a passing thought. For many of us, it's the background noise of daily life. Our inner critic is sneaky. It sounds like it's helping, pushing us to be better or to avoid embarrassment. But the truth is, it often leaves us feeling paralyzed, ashamed, and constantly behind. Even casual external criticism easily fuels this voice that lives in our head 24/7. We'll also look at how this harsh inner dialogue impacts our relationships, especially with our kids. When we're at war with ourselves, it's hard to show up with the patience, flexibility, and emotional availability parenting requires. Self-compassion isn't just self-care. It's a foundational parenting skill. There seems to be general agreement by researchers that anxiety has increased for ages 3 to 17. Just one example, Cassius and Reichman published in 2025 an analysis of that was nationally representative data and found that anxiety and depression have been steadily increasing among U.S. children and adolescents for several years. Our analysis also found a sharp rise in behavioral or conduct problems in 2020. Anxiety diagnoses in children has increased to 27% more from 2016 to 2019. Learning to shift that inner narrative is possible, and it can change not just how we treat ourselves, but how we show up for the people we love. Silencing the inner critic doesn't mean giving ourselves a free pass. It means relating to ourselves with fairness instead of fear. If we want our kids to be kinder to themselves, it starts with the emotional environment we create at home. Today's guest, who will help us learn how to shift that critical inner monologue into something more constructive, is Lynn Smith. She is a media and communication expert who helps high-level leaders turn pressure into presence. A former anchor for over 15 years for NBC, MSNBC, and CNN, she now coaches Fortune 500 executives, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs, I never say that right, to become magnetic communicators by gaining confidence. As founder of Lynn Smith Media and Communications, she helps leaders ditch robotic scripts and deliver messages that move people into action. Lynn is also a keynote speaker, host of the award-winning podcast Stroller Coaster, and author of the upcoming children's book, Just Keep Going. Thanks for being here today, Lynn.
Oh, thanks for having me. I love your podcast.
You have a different name for the inner critic. You call it the brain bully, which I loved. So tell my audience about this, and how is it helpful to diminish the inner critic?
Well, I named it because it was so persistent, not only with my clients, but with myself. So that inner voice that's like, no one wants to hear from you. You're not going to do well at this. Like, people are going to think this is stupid. I thought that I was the only one that had that, right? So I thought when I was an anchor, I had to be perfect. I had to deliver every line and never stumble. And what I learned over those 15 years is nobody wants perfection. They want presence. They want to feel served by the person that is in their living rooms every day. And so what I wanted to do is reverse engineer what it took for me to be able to enter people's living rooms and engage with them in a compelling way and help thought leaders, executives, entrepreneurs to be able to show up with the same confidence. Because let's be honest, we don't learn this in business school. We learn how to hit the numbers. We learn how to fix problems. We don't learn how to communicate effectively. And so when I started coaching executives and I realized how pervasive this problem was, I had to name it something. And that's what it is. It's just a big old bully living in your head rent-free that we have to be able to beat, because we can't silence it. What you'll learn throughout this interview, I hope, is that our brain's just wired this way. It's not doing anything it's not meant to do. It's just we're using it in the wrong way.
Oh, I love that. I like brain bully because it's something everybody can grab onto. How can someone tell the difference between their inner critic and healthy self-reflection? And what can they do about that?
That's such a good question, because we shouldn't live without the voice that's warning us. Hey, take a little bit of time to assess the risk of this situation, right? There is a healthy feedback loop that will enable us to make great decisions. When is it unhealthy? That's when it's saying things to you like, you're gonna fail at this, or everyone's gonna think this is stupid. And honestly, I had an oncologist that I was coaching that said, what if people don't think I'm smart? And I thought, if you're curing cancer and you think this, then everybody is, right? Because what happens is our mind's wired for worry. So our thoughts and this comes from caveman days, where thoughts in the back of our brain move to the front of our brain. And as we don't need to say, I'm not a brain expert, but I studied it as a journalist because I wanted to understand it in teaching people and coaching them out of it. Thoughts move to the front of our brain where our decisions and actions are made, and that results in our outcomes. So if we're feeding that front part of our brain that primally is there to protect us, things like, you're gonna screw this up, then that front part of our brain sends all these alerts. The cortisol shots, all the things that freak you out, the palms start sweating, and that's when you're saying and so and like, all of those crutch phrases, because our brain's just doing what it was programmed to do. It just doesn't know that what our high state communication is not a threat. It's not a saber-toothed tiger as we walk out of a cave. So get back in the cave and protect yourself. No, it's get out there. So how do we change that narrative? And I wanted to do this at a young age through this book, Just Keep Going, because it was so incredibly consistent as a problem in the C-suite of billion-dollar leaders. So if it's a problem at that level, it's because we're not learning at a young age, at an appropriate age, that fear can be something that, yes, we want to be cautious and take really good, healthy risks, but it's not something to avoid. It's something that will teach you, that will show you on the way to your successes how to get there. And I know for my own children, I have a 6 and 9-year-old, what do we teach them in school? Get the best grades, get first place, behave, sit still. We're not teaching them, hey, if you're afraid of something, have you asked a friend for help? Or if you think you're gonna fail, have you tried just putting one foot in front of the other? And if you're nervous, have you tried taking deep breath in and a deep breath out? And that's what his friends, Mouse is the main character, along the way teaches him how to do, just like I, hopefully, as the friend to these CEOs, teach them. There are physical techniques and strategies to overcome that performance anxiety.
So fear can be managed instead of catastrophizing.
Exactly, and you don't have to avoid it.
And we love catastrophizing.
Oh, yeah, we do. I'm a former catastrophizer myself, if that's a word. I did it all the time in my 20s and 30s. I didn't start until my mid-40s really realizing the importance, and it took my own failures to learn that. So I didn't know this until I experienced it, and I channeled it.
And failure is incredibly important. I mean, we don't really grow unless we learn from our mistakes. So that's it. You need to be able to breathe, even to look back analytically at your mistakes, right?
And isn't it funny, though, as parents, we don't want our children to fail because we want to protect them from those feelings. Yet you know, I know, and everybody else that's a parent or an executive or a leader knows that those are the ways that they got to where they are. So if we start embracing failure in this new way for our children, in the way that we had to learn decades into our own careers, then imagine the type of leaders we begin to raise. Resilient leaders, not fearless leaders, but leaders that are willing to put themselves out there and have a confidence about them, because confidence is not arrogance, right? Arrogance is believing you're good at everything. Confidence is a true belief that you can do anything despite any circumstances. And so if we can raise that at a young age, that's when we really benefit our kids.
What advice that you have given to business leaders can you give us in order to metabolize fear instead of eliminate it, besides the breathing technique you mentioned?
So the first piece of it is awareness. I was recently coaching a leader of CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, and he had a crutch phrase. You know those crutch phrases, or whatever that is for you. A lot of people can say, you know what I mean? Or does that make sense? Those phrases instantly say to your audience, you might not know what you're talking about because you're not sure of your message. So it's a distrust factor. So the first step for that particular CEO is just awareness. I didn't even want to do anything with it yet. I called it out, showed him, then he started noticing. He's like, there it is again. There it is again. And I was like, that's okay. We're just in the awareness phase. I just want you to know that it's happening first. And then once there's the awareness phase, we can go into what we do in our programs, which is really take them through the methodology in order to overcome that. Because if you don't, in communication, if you keep trying to fix the words or the presence, the stance, the nonverbal cues, you're only treating the symptom. You're not treating the disease, which is the fear. And that's why it becomes really key. If you want to become a magnetic communicator, if you want to move people with your message, you need to be able to treat the root disease, which is the fears that you have.
Which also would contribute to being able to pause when you're interacting with a partner or a child, that pause instead of filling up the space with my point of view because I'm right.
I think that's such a good point in the sense that we always kind of look at conversation as, okay, somebody said something, so I have to say something. It's kind of like a tennis match. And sometimes people just need to be seen, heard, and understood. They want to be validated. And so sometimes in relationships, and I can't say I'm an expert in that, I keep in my lane that I'm an expert in communication for business, for television. I would say my husband's probably like, you're not the best communicator in life, but I work on things. We're all imperfect. But what I've tried to learn is take what I teach leaders and apply it to my parenting. And instead of, I don't want to do this, but you have to do this, and da-da-da-da-da-da. It's, I hear, and I learned this being a podcast host myself, and I talk to a lot of parenting experts because it's the last thing I claim to be. But what they taught me and I started implementing was validation of whoever you're having a conversation with. What I'm hearing is, I see that this is really frustrating to you. I hear you. Because it's that human primal instinct of wanting to be seen, heard, and understood. And that's in our partnerships with our intimate partners, and also our partnerships with our kids, and how we are a team together trying to feel like we respect each other. We had an entire episode on respecting each other in parenting with our children as well.
I always say respect is more important than love because it gives room for disagreement, and that's an incredibly important thing to be able to do in communication. What else do you teach business leaders to do to silence their inner critic that we can apply to ourselves?
Yeah. After awareness, it's separation from the voice, right? So the first step that we take is, I want you to name your inner critic. Here's a fun exercise for everyone listening or watching is just give it a name. And I always tell the story, I named mine Bob because my son got a fish for Christmas and named him Bob. And I thought that was hysterical first. So every time that voice comes in and is like, do people like this? This is kind of hokey, Lynn. And then I can say Bob. And it separates that voice from who you actually are. And sometimes that voice might say to you, maybe you're coming off as a little too big, right? Those are some of the things. And there might be a balance between, okay, am I getting a lot of feedback that maybe I'm doing XYZ? And then I can reassess and have a great conversation with somebody I really trust in order to tweak those things. So this isn't about you should never receive feedback, you should always think you're the best. No, this is take consistent feedback that you hear, put it through the lens of those you trust, and make appropriate adjustments accordingly. And take the ones that are just beating you up like a bully would and start reframing some of those thoughts.
So you talked about confidence a little while ago. Do you think that's the opposite polarity of the inner critic?
No, I don't. I think that the opposite of the inner critic is the brain buddy. The brain buddy is the voice that's like, you know that you've tested this methodology and you know it works. When a voice might come in and say, everyone's going to think this is stupid. That's the opposite of the brain buddy, or the brain bully rather. Confidence is something you choose. Confidence is not something that you either have or are born with. It is a 100% learned skill.
Absolutely.
I had to learn it. I was the least confident person in the room. I was told I was never going to make it in television. I bombed on live shots. I bombed in keynotes because I used to, fun fact, have a really bad fear of public speaking, which I created this methodology because of that, and I saw it worked for myself, and so I began using it with my executives. I saw it worked for them, and I was like, I want this message everywhere, because we don't have to be paralyzed by our perceived weaknesses. Those are the things we think we're bad at. We just have to just keep going, and that was really the inspiration of this title of this book. Those 3 words were sent to me in a text message by one of my best friends from college when I was in a really bad spot in my early 30s. And it was just that wake-up call I needed, that snap or that slap in the face of sometimes it's not going to be great. You know this as a human, and anybody listening to this knows this is not realistic to think that there's not going to be difficult times, or that the majority of times aren't difficult, right? Like, that's life. Life is hard. But if we choose to just keep going, get the help I needed in order to overcome my fear of public speaking. I got coaching. Create a method in order to overcome it. If we follow this methodology, imagine what we'd be able to accomplish. Imagine what our children would be able to do if they didn't call up in college when they're alone on the first day and be like, I can't do this. I can't handle any big feelings, because I was really protected from those throughout my childhood.
So you're really talking about perseverance, sticking with it. What?
And resilience.
Yes. Say more about resilience.
So resilience became so much more powerful when I faced the embarrassment of my failures, because failures stink, but they don't happen in a silo. So they happen in front of people publicly, and it's embarrassing. And so you can either choose to sit in that embarrassment, or you can just keep going and you can push through it and live in it. And that's my definition of resilience. And I think that there is no one definition of resilience. It is, what does it mean to you to push through? And I think perseverance is the added bonus of the feeling that comes on the other end of pushing through and just keep going, is that you have this true emotion that feels very fulfilling. It's almost better than joy, because joy is great, but when it's achieved through hard times, it's so much sweeter, right?
Absolutely. And I think some of that's about achievement, succeeding when it was difficult. And so, yeah, I think that's true. So what would you say to somebody who's in a place of giving up and doesn't want to do the pushing through?
I would ask them the question, what does your life look like by giving up? Right? So picture very vividly, this is the visualization technique I want you to do, is close your eyes and picture yourself 5 years from now. And you are in the same place, you are doing the same thing, you are feeling the same ick, because the whole reason that you want to do something different is because it feels icky right now. And really feel it. And it's not going to feel great. And what I sort of say as a quote is, courage is a lot easier of a choice when you consider the alternative.
Yes.
Consider that alternative of staying in that ick. And ask yourself that question, is it worth feeling that for the next 5 years?
Yeah. That's stagnating in the ick. Yeah, I like that. So how can we talk to our kids when they want to give up without pushing? Because I loved what you said for adults, but what would you recommend for kids besides reading your book?
Yeah, we created a parent and educator guide because this is just the starting point. We wanted this, I wanted it to be a conversation starter for parents because I know I've tried as a parent, not only from understanding when my mom has said to me, your goal is to parent yourself out of a job. Meaning, if I parent in the right way that I want to, then when he's 25, 35, 45, he's not going to be running home and being like, fix this. And so we created a guide in order to start the conversation around what does it mean to be brave? What do you think it means to be brave? It's prompting questions. Have you ever failed? What did that feel like? That must have been disappointing. Not, it's okay to fail. It's no big deal. You're great. But yeah, that's disappointing. So what could we do to make that better? Or maybe we're just going to be disappointed. So it's a conversation starter. This book is as much for us as parents as it is for our kids, because we need this reminder right now too. We turn on the news every day and we need to just remind ourselves, just keep going. Because we cannot control so much of what's happening to us, but we can control how we react to it and what we do with it and how we impact others as a result of it.
Yes.
And we're impacting our kids probably most importantly.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So you're making me think that I say absolutely a lot.
It's a crutch phrase. That's okay. It's awareness.
No, but
it's the awareness stage. But isn't that interesting? You started to pick it up.
One of the things that I really appreciate is learning something new from a podcast guest, and that just very quickly jumped into my head.
You know why it's happening, real quick?
Yeah.
Why it's happening is because your brain is wanting just 1 second to process what I said and then think about what your next question is going to be.
Yes, that's right.
And so you're giving yourself a split second to do that. And so one of the things I advise leaders is allow yourself to not have to rely on a script or anything that would force you to say, okay, is this a good transition to the next question? And once you get more comfortable with that, you'll see the crutch phrase starting to fall away.
Yeah, okay. So, what simple language or routines can families use to help kids bounce back from failure?
I love this because we included a courage toolkit in the Educator and Parent Guide in order to give children the guide to what happens when you have these big feelings. So I have my oldest who is a big feeling, big reaction child, which is why the book starts with, sometimes Mouse has big feelings. Because we name, and I got this advice from parenting experts, we name, like, it seems like you have really big feelings about this, so that he understands why he's having such huge reactions, that it's his big feelings. And in the Courage Toolkit, it has all these different tools around it that kids can cut out and then put into their toolkit. So jumping up and down, because that gets your blood flowing. When you're stressed, we know biologically our blood vessels tighten, and that's why we get really, and it looks like you're about to be that kid from The Incredibles and just burst. And what do we do when our kids do that? Stop screaming, right? Like, we just get so angry and frustrated. I'm so guilty of this, so I want no one at home to be thinking like, oh, what does she know? She doesn't have to deal with kids with tantrums. I need this advice more probably than anyone listening to this podcast, which is why I created it. It's forcing me to remember when I just want to say, stop it, stop. It's, have you tried jumping up and down? It looks like you just need to get some blood flowing. Let's do it together. Jump up and down. Once they've calmed down, it's, let's take a deep breath in. And we do this at night because sometimes my boys get really hyper at night. And then let's use, all of this applies to adults as well. So arguing with a partner, can we just take 5 minutes and cool off and then do some of these breath exercises separately, and then we'll come back and talk when we're stabilized. But take a deep breath in, take a deep breath out, a deep breath in. And now my kids are like, and they understand what's coming because we started this at a young age. We also included a worry journal. And a worry journal was born from some advice I had gotten from a parenting counselor that I was leaning on for some help in big feelings and big reactions. And you can keep it by your child's bed. And it's just a way for them to be like, hey, can I grab my worry journal? And then just write out some of the things they're worried about. Like my son, he's like, Mom, will you go get my worry journal? He's 6. And he can't write, so I write for him. And he said, I'm really upset at my brother. He's really mean to me today. And it was I wouldn't have said to him, are you worried about anything as we're going to bed? But he has become aware of the need to express it because we have a place for him to express it that's safe and it's on a page. Not, hey, Mom, I want to talk about my feelings, which is just not realistic.
Yes. And one of the things I was thinking that I know helps children is identifying the feeling. And so being able to say, I'm angry at my brother right now, upset was the word you used, it's fine. And labeling disappointment, because I think a lot of struggle with emotions begins with disappointment. And I would say to my grandchildren and my children, maybe you need more practice with disappointment when I would say no, because disappointment is hard, and we do have to learn how to make it bearable because we're not going to get everything we want in Alice's restaurant, So I
think I've been in the very same situation as you.
And I really enjoy that, reminding them that it is a part of learning to build resilience, I think, by accepting disappointment. One of the things I teach one of my clients yesterday said, I still have that index card. In the pandemic, I started doing all telehealth, but I used to hand out index cards, and one of the ones, my favorite, was it says expectations in a 90-degree angle, expectations up here, and down here, it says reality, and then I write a circle gap. And I think expectations are such a trigger for children, for adults, towards disappointment and trying to cope with reality, which isn't a picnic, but it really matters. Like, people shouldn't be making up numbers,
Like, maybe one of the most important life skills possible out there is handling disappointment, which is a version of resiliency and perseverance. And I love that you use that word because in the book we have a scene in which Mouse is disappointed because Bear won't share his berries. And he's disappointed. And it's like, have you tried giving yourself a hug? Like the idea of, you are going to have disappointment and it's probably serving you. So I began to view disappointment because in the business that I was in for 15 years of news, rejection is pretty much standard and criticism is pretty much daily. So from appearance criticism to delivery criticism to you're being a little preachy and all of these things, like I had to learn how to filter feedback and say, okay, is there something that I need to change? Then criticism, which is different than feedback, which is intended to be harmful, whether they are realizing it's intended to be harmful or not. And I'll give you a good example. When I was starting out at a new network, it was suggested to me that maybe I needed to look a little bit older and smarter. So they put me in glasses. And I have 20/20 vision. So being so uncertain of myself and not having the skill set that I learned through all these years of criticism and rejection, I did it and I wore them and it felt so inauthentic and so bad and all of the things, but I needed to learn by doing. I wasn't born like, I don't need to change anything. I was born a human, which is someone who's wanting to make people happy. Okay, you think I need to look smarter? Okay, don't fire me. I'll wear glasses. And those are challenges that are going to come up throughout your child's life over and over and over again. And we've had these conversations, whether it's a lost soccer tournament or getting cut from a team or a friend not being nice. And, sometimes I'm very blunt about it. I'm just like, life's not easy, babe. Like, this is something you're going to come up against time and time again. Not nice people. What do we do when we meet not nice people? We go find other people. And it's the reminder of why we want to be nice. But it's keeping it very simple and very frank of like, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have disappointments. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do with it?
So, in particular with perfectionists, which you mentioned earlier, what would your advice be that could be helpful to them? Because I do think perfectionism is one of the hardest things to change.
So let me share a story with you on when I broke up with perfectionism. Because I am a recovering perfectionist. I thought I had to be perfect. I was in a business, and then you see me, right? And you see me on Instagram and it's a picture perfect, yada, yada, yada. Well, hey, let me tell you, talk about Instagram versus reality, right? Don't believe everything you see and read. But I worked an overnight shift in one of my first national jobs. And so I would just study and make sure every single word was memorized. But I would sound so robotic. And it was so inauthentic. And on March 11th, 2011, there was a call in the newsroom from a producer that said, get to a camera now. There's been an earthquake in Japan. And I raced, and I had no time to prepare. I had no time to read scripts. And I had no time to worry about being perfect. I sat down and he said, just tell people what you're seeing. And what I saw was just a wall of water that began to form on live television. And a tsunami hit this coastal town and swallowed homes and cars and people. And I had to serve the audience. And I didn't have time to worry about perfection. I had to worry about connection. How was I serving this audience so that they understood the gravity of what was happening? And so much of this is getting out of your own head and out of your own way. Perfectionism is rooted in acceptance of others. And that's a very natural human instinct. It comes from our tribal days when we lived, and I did a lot of research around this because I'm writing an adult book and I wanted some backing behind what I kept seeing, right? This isn't something I made up, obviously. It's something I kept seeing a pattern in, and as a journalist, I wanted research behind it. And in our primal tribal days, we had to be people pleasers because we'd get killed if we didn't. There was a leader, and then there were people that followed. And if we broke from that, we could get killed. So it's our primal instinct to want to be liked and pleasing of others. And billion-dollar platforms were built on it. How many likes have I gotten? How many comments? I call it in my programs external validation. But what the problem with external validation, which you know very well because this is your expertise, is that there's never enough of it. We'll never have enough likes. We'll never have enough comments. But if we shift to internal validation, which is, what do I know works about this? Maybe something doesn't and I need to change. What have I seen that is making an impact? And we're focused solely on facts and not what other people are telling us or feeding us, like you need to look smarter or you need to look older. Then we see a shift in our confidence. We see a shift in our delivery. Because remember, our thoughts, which move to our front of our brain, is where our decisions and actions are made, which result in our outcomes. So if we are thinking, I've seen this work, and I know the transformation that's possible, the decision and action I take is big and confident. And I'm not saying I'm not saying so, because I'm sure of my message. And that's really the transformation that people experience when they really start thinking of the inner work that they need to do in the back of that brain. That's when they start to see the difference.
I also think there's an connection to yourself that needs to be made about the messiness of being a human, the messiness of trying to understand somebody. It's why I like the books by Martha Wells, the sci-fi about Murderbot. And he's always making analyses about how bad humans are and how messy and their emotions are all over the place. And I think so. I love that you use that word connection with the other person, but I also think it's that also about connection with yourself.
Right. And it's the inner work that we do. So much of what we're looking for, the heaven from hell situation, right? We've been living in this stuck and feeling like I don't get why I'm stumbling, I don't get why I want to quit, and all of these things, to the heaven of I feel like I could stand up there and raise my hand and open my mouth and feel like I'm magnetic, where people are just drawn to me, right? That heaven happens when you do the inner work. It doesn't happen when you hire Lynn Smith and I tell you how to talk in sound bites. That's not the outcome. It's when you have awareness around what I teach. And then you start doing the work yourself. And then you go home and you say, aha, okay, that makes sense that I've been struggling with that because of this. Now what am I going to do about it? Because our brain, as I mentioned, is wired this way. So it's going to keep coming up. The inner critic's going to resurface. So you have to continuously, what we say, tame it. You don't silence it. You can beat it. You have to continuously tame it.
So any last words of wisdom before you share your website and book and podcast name?
I think that it's the reminder that we all were unfortunately raised to be perfectionists, not intentionally, but we are a society that praises the best. Whether that's with social media platforms and influencers and $150 million podcast deals, or it's gold medals, we live in a society that rewards exceptionalism, which is great. It's great, but it puts this unrealistic expectation that 8 billion people are going to be exceptional. And so, do we set a standard for ourselves that instead of putting this bar of I need to be an Olympian, we say I want to be the best version of who I am. And that's really the crux of Just Keep Going. That this is a journey, not the end game of it. It's all the wonderful things you learn along the way. My greatest embarrassments and failures and all of that would never have landed me in this seat right now. This book was rejected by publisher after publisher after publisher. And my agent said to me, I'm just so sorry. This is so hard, I know. And I was like, if I can't deal with this, I shouldn't be writing this book. And this book would not be what it is. It wouldn't have the illustrator, which I have to say, Lauren Gallegos, shout out to you. You beautifully brought Mouse to life. It would not be what it is without the illustrations. And it wouldn't have had that had I not been rejected. So what is the journey you want to take in order to be the best version of yourself? Not the Olympian version of yourself. Not the CEO version of yourself, which is great too. But what is the version of yourself that's most authentic? And that's the journey I hope that people take themselves on through reading this book to their children and then just in their own professional life and personal life.
And tell us where we can find you.
Oh, everything's on my website, which is lynsmith.com. And please follow me on social media. I share a lot of these tips and more, which is at lynsmithtv, both on LinkedIn, Instagram, all the socials.
All right. The inner critic's job description seems to be talk trash and never clock out. But today's conversation gave us some new ideas. Talk back or reassign their duties. Progress doesn't mean silencing the voice completely. It means learning not to believe everything it says. Glad you all joined us today. Follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Rhoda on Couples.
Rhoda, you nailed it.
Thank you for listening to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't. If you have enjoyed the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes and help get the word out. To learn more or connect with Rhoda, visit therapyideas.net.